And so Anthony was here yesterday. We're just outside the door in the lobby, and we were talking, and because we've been finding archive video of shows from when we were in our young days. Two of which are now up on our YouTube page. Midline has a YouTube page. You might have to search Midline Band on YouTube to find it, but it is there, and we've got some of our music videos are on that, along with the whole show from when we opened for Motley Crue in 1999. And I was talking with Anthony. I said, dude, we are 26 years old in that video. And we were freaking amped up on that show. Just the amount of energy that we had playing was really over the top. It's fun to watch, but it is on YouTube there. And I remember Anthony and I were talking, and he said, "Yeah, I did the Spud Brothers radio show that next morning because we did 2 nights with Motley Crue." And so Anthony was in the hotel on the phone with the Spud Brothers here, and Anthony said, or the Chris Brewer had said something along the lines of, "I was talking to Anthony the other day, and he was saying, I don't know how much longer we could do this because we're getting old." And he said, "Anthony, tell people how old you are." He said, 26. Oh, to be 26 again. Yes, we were on fire and full of life, and not much has changed. We're still full of life and on fire. We just can't find the fire extinguisher, which is good. But I mentioned last week, like, Midline is the only band still to this day that I've ever been in that every single person in the band is 100% dedicated to that goal, that vision. And it's a pretty special thing. Not a lot of bands get that. I think some bands think for a moment they have that, but Midline's been a band since 1990. Midline's been through Chicago a handful of times. I've been through Chicago many, many times with different bands that I've played with. Not just the airport, but actually in Chicago. And then we've had a family trip or two through Chicago. Always in the great part of Chicago, right? Like the Miracle Mile area, which I think that is Michigan Avenue, if I remember correctly. You know, it's pretty upscale stuff. But we've also heard in the news about the horrible crime that happens in Chicago and the bad parts of Chicago and things like that. Those are places that you don't think about too much sometimes when you're just traveling through an area. And so in 2001 or 2, I think it was 2002 because I'm pretty sure Christian was born, or maybe it was 2003. Midline was signed to a record label called Gotham Records, and we were also sponsored by Jägermeister, and Jägermeister would put on these tours, and they would go all over the United States. And so we were part of 2 or 3 of those tours. This particular one was with the bands Saliva and Breaking Benjamin. And we were presented with the opportunity to do 33 dates on this tour, and that's what our goal was, to go and do that. However, when we left to go on this tour, our record label refused to give us the tour support that we needed. So that was that's a whole nother story. But so we were financing the tour on our own, so we were only able to do a handful of those dates because that's all that we could afford. And so we had to go through Chicago and Minneapolis and Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Going through Chicago, and Stymie and Scott were flying to meet us, so we needed to pick them up, and we had driven the motorhome with the trailer to Chicago to get them. Well, when we got to Chicago, I wanted to stay somewhere near the airport, and because most hotels have shuttles that can shuttle, back and forth to the airport. So we were looking and looking, and everything's just outrageously expensive, $800 a night rooms that were close to the airport. And so I was driving this motorhome and trailer through the ridiculous traffic of Chicago, Illinois, and I went over the freeway overpass, and we started to see more places that a rock band could afford to stay. So we're talking about like Motel 6 looking type places and um, things like that. I pulled over onto the side of the road at one hotel that I thought, well, this looks like maybe we could afford this. I got out. Everybody else waited inside. I think maybe Tony, our sound engineer, went in with us, and I went in. I said, we need to get 2 rooms for the night, and how much would that be? And I think it was like $89 a room or whatever. I was like, okay, we can handle that. So we got 2 rooms. They had the adjoining door in between the two of them, so that all 6 of us. There's 6, 4, 5, 7 of us, because drum tech, guitar tech, sound guy, 4 band people. And then I talked to the clerk at the front desk about picking up Scott and Stymie from the airport. Told them what time their flight was, where they would be, and he kind of spoke broken English and said, "Yeah, that no problem. They would get them picked up." So we didn't think any more about that. And then I also, what was important to having a room at a hotel was a place to park this beast that we were driving. So again, I was asking the clerk, like, they had all these security cameras and you could see different views of the parking lot and the roadways and stuff from the front counter. And I said, and you could clearly see the motorhome from out the window. And I said, is there a place that we can park that? And he said, yeah, you go around the block and go through the alleyway, and then you can pull into the parking lot. I don't think this guy's ever driven a big rig like that before. So I said, okay. So we got all turned around, came around, and I think Anthony or somebody said, there's no way that's going to fit down the alley. And I was being brave, and so I decided to turn, and we were going down the alley. Now, a motorhome is pretty wide, especially with the mirrors. I maybe had 2 to 3 inches on each side of the mirror of not scraping the building. I mean, we were gingerly driving through there. Had I been in a small compact car, yeah, you could drive down that no problem, turn right into the parking lot. But there was no way to turn that. I mean, if you could have got the motorhome to turn in there was probably plenty of room to park a motorhome and a trailer. Again, I think we were like pushing 70 feet long with the motorhome and the trailer. I was like, there's no way. So I finished driving through the alley, went back around, decided to go around the block, and there's housing and stuff behind the hotel. And I think I went around the block 2 or 3 times before suddenly everybody in the band was feeling really white. And I say that not to be, this is not a racial thing. If, in today's climate, it feels like you got to preface all your uh, differences of race by saying, I'm not racist. No, I'm not racist at all. So I was noticing that everybody was starting to come out of their house looking at us like we were from Mars, and they were all black people and looking at us like, what are you doing here? Again, I have no problem with people of of different kinds or whatsoever. I'm just like, hey, we're a rock band, Drove around the block, and we are just trying to find somewhere safe to park our motorhome and trailer. And there was a doctor's office right across the street, kind of on the corner, and all the cars were leaving. So this probably about 6, 7 o'clock at night, and I asked our sound guy Tony. I said, hey, run in there and ask if we can park our motorhome in their parking lot until the morning, because we had to leave pretty early in the morning to get to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So Tony jumped out, went in, talked to whoever. They said, yeah, fine, no problem. Nobody's back here till 8 in the morning anyway, and I think we had planned to be out of there like at 7 in the morning, so no problem. Pulled in there, got turned around. Again, this thing is huge, and I think our guitar tech Jimmy said, you should back the trailer up against something so that if somebody decided to try to get the lock off the trailer or whatever, they would not be able to still open the door. So we backed the motorhome and the trailer up against a tree, a pretty big tree, just tight up against it, and we all grabbed our things and went into the hotel. And then once Scott and Stymie got there, which that was a whole nother story of them trying to figure out how to get to the hotel, because I had arranged them to be picked up. And so these people were standing there, and I think they had a sign that said Midline on it. So Scott and Stymie got in there, and they got to the hotel, but it was sketchy for them. And everybody by this time is pretty hungry. And so what do? You go walk somewhere to find something to eat. And so we went out on the street, and we probably walked 4 or 5 blocks down to sort of this weird convenience store that also had like pizza and sub sandwiches and those kind of things there. Got food. Again, we're the only white people that you could see anywhere. And but again, we didn't really think much about it. We're just in Chicago. The uh, culture of that is different. And we were just having a good time, got our food, got our drinks, went back to the hotel. We were hanging out. We were playing cards and having some beers and those kind of things, and just having a great time. And I think Stymie happened to look out the window and saw a cop car next to our motorhome. And so we thought that was kind of weird. And then we also noticed that every window in this hotel we were staying at was barred. Now, we've been to LA a million times, and a lot of buildings have bars on the windows, especially the Hollywood area. And, especially on lower floor windows, there's bars on the windows. And, well, this is a multi-level hotel that has bars on every window. And the police saw that we were looking out at the window at them, and they had their flashlights. They were looking in the windows of the motorhome, and they saw us looking out, and they said, "Hey, is this your motorhome?" And we said, "Yes." And they said, "Is anybody sleeping in it?" And we said, "No." And they said, "Good." And then the two cops, one white, one black cop, came walking over to us, and we're in the second story window, and they said, "Well, we work this neighborhood all the time. And if somebody had been sleeping in that motorhome, they would be dead in the morning. They had been murdered." And we were like, "What?" They said what triggered, or what the flag was for them, is they saw this motorhome, and not that it was just a motorhome, but it said Idaho on the license plates. And so that immediately alerted them, like, okay, we're dealing with people who have no idea where they are. And they said, "You guys are in the worst possible neighborhood in Chicago that you could ever imagine to be in. And we knew that you didn't know that because of the Idaho plates, that you were from out of town." And they said, "We take dead bodies out of this neighborhood multiple times a week. There's anywhere up to 3 to 7 murders that happen in every single week in this neighborhood that you're in. People being shot, people being stabbed, whatever kind of crime you could imagine, that people are being brutally murdered in this little area of Chicago that we happen to be staying in." and they warned us. They said, "Do not leave your hotel at all. Don't walk down the street." Well, we'd already done that. We laugh now, but at the time it was pretty creepy and kind of freaked us out a little bit. And they said, "Did you guys, when are you leaving?" And we said, "Well, we're leaving around 7 o'clock in the morning. We got to continue on to Milwaukee." And obviously they knew we were in a band at this point. And yeah, they said, "Okay, well, we'll stay and watch your vehicle for the rest of the night. You guys stay in your hotel rooms. Don't go anywhere. Don't leave." They were even suggesting don't leave your hotel room, period. Like, to go around looking for a drink at the vending machine or anything. And we're like, okay. And, thank you very much. All those kind of things. I remember I had to get up in the bathroom to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. It was probably 4:35 in the morning. And I looked out the window, and those guys were still sitting in their police car right next to our motorhome, talking, doing whatever. And when we got up to leave in the morning. We were packed up our stuff to go, and they drove away. So thank you to the Chicago police for watching Midline stuff uh, while we didn't know where we were. They told us, had you guys gotten a hotel room just on the other side of the freeway, totally in the clear. You would have been 100% fine. You could have walked, gone, and done whatever you wanted to. So being naive Idaho boys playing in a rock band, we just want to rock, you know? Everybody's friendly everywhere you go. So that's my story. Midline stories from the road. I mean, we've got thousands and thousands of stories that we could tell over the years of little things. Some of them you wouldn't understand unless you were there or if you've watched the movie Spinal Tap, because a lot of those scenes in that movie are pretty true to life for a lot of bands. And there you go.